Yo, what's going on, y'all? So we have the lovely Ciaccona here today, and of course we got a guide that we have for y'all. So this is going to dive into everything as y'all are familiar with my previous guides, such as my Phoebe guide, my Aero Rover guide, my Zani guide, all the above. You'll be seeing guides like this, and my guides are always different because we dive into these things and we make sure you know every single type of scenario, every single type of thing, and we make it easy for you to understand. So we want to dive into here talking about this new Aero unit, which is Ciaccona, and we're going to explain how she works, her teams, how you should probably be utilizing her, you know, her all of her abilities, all the above. So as we first hop into Ciaccona, understand that she's an Aero unit that can be used as kind of a sub DPS. You could kind of use her as a DPS as well. I'll go over this in kind of a very flexible and fast-paced team. We'll go over this. Like I said, there's a handful of different comps here that you can also utilize with the Aero or with Spectro as well. So, you know, you probably heard, of course, okay, yeah, she can be good with Aero. You've heard that her ult can transfer in between Spectro and Aero, but you don't really understand these other different ways that she can be played. So we're going to discuss those here. So first and foremost, let's open up this menu here and see what they kind of have as their combat roles. So this is what they have listed as her combat roles, which is Concerto Efficiency, Quick Concerto Energy Regeneration, Traction, pulls targets within range towards a specific position, and Aero Erosion. Now for those who are not familiar with Aero Erosion is similar to Spectro Frazzle, which I go over in detail in my Phoebe guide if you want to learn more about Spectro Frazzle. But Aero Erosion pretty much is a dot mechanic, death over time, and we'll be seeing this as well as versions with Lupa, which are fire ones, and the ones that are coming with Havoc. So we will be seeing this mechanic come with new characters across the board with these dot abilities, capabilities, DOT. And so with that being said, pretty much everything that she does is going to inflict Aero Erosion on pretty much everything. So her basic attack is going to inflict Aero Erosion, and her resident skill is going to inflict Aero Erosion, but you will need to do this in a certain type of way. So the first thing to understand here is that you are going to want to pretty much always hit this basic attack 4. When you hit this basic attack 4, a solo concert will start. So you see how she's singing right now. The solo concert will start. And during this solo concert, you will get an Aero damage bonus of 24% on it. Now, if I stop or if I move like so, you see this will be created in Ensemble Sylph, which will continue the solo concert. And you can make up to 2 of these at any given time. So now we're solo concerting. Let's move again. Now we have 2 of these. So they're finishing out the solo concert, and this by default at 24%. As you can see here, if you go over here with a solo concert, over here, it's going to implement 24%. When Ciaccona or Ensemble Sylph perform a solo concert, they give 24% Aero damage bonus to all nearby resonators in the team. This effect is not stackable. So even though you can create 2 Ensemble Sylphs, it's only applying to you regardless. But pretty much don't worry too much about this because you're pretty much going to have this Aero damage bonus buff 100% uptime. Because the way that her gameplay works, you're pretty much always going to be going to basic attack 4. So it makes it very straightforward in that regard. So there's not really much to worry about here. It's just going to happen. It's going to come natural. Now, if you do exit out of your, okay, with the Ensemble Sylph, if you use your resonant skill and you kind of end early here, it won't generate this Aero damage bonus. So the Aero damage bonus is really being generated from doing the basic attack 4s, and that's pretty much it. So that's how that's being generated. That's the most proper way to generate the Ensemble Sylphs here. But the big thing here to understand is pretty much that it just comes natural. So like you really don't have to worry about this. You're pretty much always going to get this 24% Aero damage bonus boost at all times. Like, it's just going to happen because you're just going to play her naturally that way because she wants those basic attack 4s regardless. And so the reason why she wants these basic attack 4s is because you want to build up this bottom bar at the bottom of the screen. So I actually want to get rid of this by pressing heavy attack, and you'll see this here. This is very straightforward, just pulls everything together. But she can accumulate these bars simply by doing her basic attack 4. Boom, like so. Also, she can get that by doing her intro skill. But you're just going to get these regardless. So it does not matter if you are fighting someone. You can charge this up before or after or whatever. You're going to get this regardless. You notice how that one over there disappeared because you can only have 2 Ensemble Sylphs up at one time. But either way, you're going to get all 3 of these, and then when you have all 3 of those, you will be able to hold down heavy attack and it will do this attack right here, which will pull things together. This one's a pretty straightforward skill here. There's nothing fancy about this. As you can see here, just gonna go over to heavy attack right here. Let me turn down this volume on the voices, that way it stops talking every time we go into the freaking menu. Let's turn it down a little bit, right? But nonetheless, you're gonna go over here, and you can see on her heavy attack here, it will show this right here, and then also this right here, heavy attack quadruple downbeat. So it says when there's 3 segments of musical essence, which is her concerto bar that we show at the bottom of the screen, you can hold heavy attack, pull them in, and it will deal arrow damage bonus. It's very straightforward, nothing fancy here, nothing that you need to know that's fancy here. Then she can hold up to 3, as you just saw, and then casting basic attack stage 4 or intro recovers 1 segment of musical essence, as I mentioned. You also note that up here, this by default, you get a damage increase by 30% on this heavy attack. So like I said, keep in mind that everything that she does is arrow damage related. So this is why I also said that you can kind of play her as a DPS too, in like a pseudo type of role, in a fast-paced team, which will show, which is not this team that we're currently on right now. And let me show you also how this heavy attack is going to work, just how it sucks in real quick. So you see here, I have 3 of these bars here, 3 of these, whatever they're called, the musical notes. I want to get the name proper. Hold on. We want to get the name proper. So you have the musical essence. There we go. So we have 3 of these musical essences, which allows us to do the heavy attack. And so it's going to pull everything in. So this is a perfect example here because there's a bunch of mobs here. And we'll do that. Boom. We see everything got pulled in like that. That could be nice for this because remember, she also uses this little tornado. So like, had I had this active as well, this would have been really good to use at the same time to really capitalize on that wind damage as well. So it's pretty nice, as y'all can see there. But pretty much in regard to the Ensemble Sylphs, just think of it like this. Pretty much you're like a Naruto character. You're doing like this fancy ninjutsu with all these flashy hand movements. You're summoning, really cool ninjutsu. So someone attacks you while you're doing all your fancy hand movements. And lo and behold, you have a shadow clone that appears whenever you're interrupted. So it's like, oh man, okay, you're over here, and now you're doing this here. You're doing your fancy ninjutsus, and then Gar comes out of nowhere and you have to dodge. Oh, but lo and behold, you have a shadow clone that continues your ninjutsu while you dodge Gar's attacks and you fight Gar. Okay, so pretty much just look at it like that. So you have a bunch of shadow clones, so you're a big Naruto character right now. Okay, so congratulations, you've entered the Naruto verse. But that's the easiest way to understand the Ensemble Sylphs. That way it's not complicated for you, it makes it really easy for you to understand. The shadow clones that continue your ninjutsu casting, plain and simple. And they give you arrow damage buffs. But remember, it's just a flat. It can only be 24, but you can have these out regardless. So it's like, even though one finishes the song early, the other one's still going. Like I said, don't think too much about this one, because it's just going to happen naturally. You're always going to be going to her basic attack 4, because you need it to build up that bar for the heavy attack. So you're always going to be doing that regardless. It's just going to happen naturally. Don't even think too much about it. Moving on. A notable mention as well is that you can press G here. You can go into this mode right here, and you can just shoot things as well. But this comes kind of default to all pistol users. You will see this in her skill tree as well, as if you want to let it like the modifier or anything like that. But you should see it down here. The aimed attack, press aim to enter aiming mode, will deal arrow damage. This is considered heavy attack damage. So keep that in mind as well. Just want y'all to note this. You're not going to use this too much. However, it is an option, and it's considered heavy attack damage. So if you want it to, get some extra heavy attack damage in your skill sets, your echo sets, then that is an option as well. You see the aim shot damage here. Nothing too crazy. The full shot charge aim shot, 73.37% right here, 73.37%. So that is an option. Just wanted to make that aware to y'all, regardless if you're going to, actually use it or not, which you probably will not. So let's see if we can get this guy right there. BOwNg. Now in her ult and liberation, this is something that I really want you to kind of notice here. And actually, we're going to change over to this team here. I'm in the Zani team right here, which we'll kind of come back to. But I'm actually going to pop over into this. I know this might seem strange. You know what? We'll just go full-blown Aero just for y'all. So keep in mind that she gives Aero boost across the board. So playing her in an Aero team is beneficial. So ideally speaking, if you were doing an Aero team, you would want to be using Cartethyia. This is a no-brainer. Cartethyia is going to be very heavily benefited by Ciaccona. So if you don't have an Aero unit right now, a main Aero unit, then just get Cartethyia, which you're probably going to get anyway, and you'll be perfectly fine. So this guy can also be used for her. But you will notice that she gives Aero damage across the board. And one way that you can kind of really go about playing her is her Liberation Focus. So let's go into a fight right here and let's kind of showcase this. Alright, we're going to go into Flirtless here because we love going into her. And I'll also note something as well on her Liberation while we're in here. So I'll run this like a couple times. I'll probably cut it short and then run it again because I want you to see something first about her Liberation. At first, I guess I'll explain how her Liberation works, so we'll do it right off the jump. And then I'll probably restart it and kind of show you also what I'm talking about here. So we'll go in here and we'll just go ahead and just kind of pop this thing out. We're just trying to get some bars for quick going right here. First, remember, I am an Aero Rover, which means I can pull Aero Erosion stats as well on top of that. So we can go into here, and I want you to see this as well. For Liberation. First and foremost, look at the HP bar up top. You don't know if y'all saw that, we'll go back to it. But as you can see here, she'll have two versions there of Aero and Spectro. So A or D, you can change between those. Whichever the last one that you press is, if you exit out, so say I change characters, it still goes. So it's still going to trigger the Aero Erosion because it's the last one I use. By default, Aero Erosion is going to be what plays if you don't press any input. So if you just do her Liberation, then change out, it's going to be Aero Erosion. However, if I were to do her Aero Erosion and then I press A, which is the Spectral one, or whichever button is for you, then instead it will be Spectral whenever I am off field and it's doing the song. So it will instead inflict Spectro stacks. So let's go ahead and leave here, and then we'll kind of show you the Liberation, and I'll go back in there and show you also what I want to show you. But the Liberation is going to last for about 30-35 seconds. It's kind of the range I timed in. Either way, it's 30 seconds at least, maybe 35 seconds, but I may have miscounted due to, like, you know, the animation or something like that. But either way, it's 30 seconds at least. It's the duration of it. The cooldown is only 20 seconds. So this could be, you know, more or less 100% uptime if you're playing here as an all field. You see the 20 seconds right there. And then the stack of Spectro, Frazzle, or Aero Erosion will be implemented about every 2 seconds or so. So that's the big thing about her Liberation. But I also want y'all to see here with her Liberation, and like I said, you know, in case you want to see it in words, Recital is her initial, this Recital here, so the improved symphonic poem together, that's her initial hit, and then it goes into Recital, which is when you are controlling the character, and then if you switch to another character, it goes into the symphonic poem, which is just based on whichever one you last press. Now, one thing you should note here is, and you may have seen this when we were fighting, but Ciaccona is immune to interruptions and takes 50% less damage while she is in this phase. Also, on top of this, you get a shield equal to 100% of her max HP for 4 seconds. So when you use her Liberation, you have a shield of 100% of her HP as well as take minus 50% damage, which means this can pretty much be used to slow down the fight. Because you can use your Liberation and then you're not taking pretty much any damage. So you can kind of slow down the fight, especially if there's like a big attack coming. You can slow it down and then boom, you can switch your character or whatever. So use this as well. This is another way to play her. And then you also notice down here below, I have her outro skill being Aero Erosion damage dealt to targets near the active Resonator is amplified by 100% for 30 seconds. So like I said, she just really makes Aero Erosion, everything surrounding it, much better. Aero Erosion and Aero damage, really, really good. So she works really good in these team comps, and which is why you really would want to play her in an Aero comp. Even though she has the option of putting on that Spectro Frazzle, it's not the most beneficial one. And we'll go over that team here in a bit later. But I kind of want you to see here, as well as we go in here, I want you to focus on the HP bar whenever I do the Liberation. And this is what I'm pretty much kind of saying about playing her as a DPS, or like a kind of like a pseudo fast pace, switching out type of DPS, and really capitalizing on her Liberation. But pretty much you can go here, and by the way, I'm using Jianxin here because her outro is also Liberation bonus increase. So we're going to do that. That's what we're going to do. Now I could have came in here, I guess, started this a bit differently, but it's okay. So we're going to keep playing this here, and we'll have a Liberation bonus here for her. But I want you to notice, regardless, the HP bar, whenever I use Ciaccona's Liberation here, want you to take note of this when I use it. Watch the HP bar. You see how it kind of drops right there. I figured this fight actually really isn't that the best option here. But pretty much what I'm getting at here is that her modifier on her liberation is actually pretty much like the best in the game. It's very strong, the amount it does initially. So that means that you can actually build her in a way where you're using liberation substats potentially in order to amplify her gameplay. But you can also kind of play her just in a way where you're kind of running her as kind of a DPS-ish. So I want to go out of here, and I'm going to actually pop in Verina or Shorekeeper. We don't have Shorekeeper, so I'm going to use Verina, but Shorekeeper is also an option that you can use here. So in place of him, we're going to pop in Shorekeeper. But you can use Aero Rover as an option here on a win team. Like I said, I don't really think this fight is the best fight because Cartethyia is an Aero mob, this boss is. And now, while of course there's not, theoretically supposed to be any resistance to these, to the same element, this game doesn't work like that. There's not really any solid proof on that. I do think that these characters, these bosses, when they are that element, they do have at least some sort of inherent slight resistance to it. Because it felt that way when I was doing the hologram with this group. So I did lots of testing on this, but it felt that way when I was doing the hologram with this group. So we'll go back in here and we'll kind of showcase this instead. And so you can use a multitude of different options here, but pretty much this right here is capitalizing on the arrow. Also want to note as well, before we jump into this, we'll get back to these weapons, but I am using her main weapon, which is going to also add this arrow damage bonus as well to her. Inflicting arrow erosion on the target gives 24% arrow damage bonus on top of that, and then also create some shred here, some arrow resistance by 10% on the enemy for arrow resistance down for 20 seconds. So keep that in mind. I am using her weapon. However, her signature weapon I feel isn't necessary. It's good, especially for an Aero team. If you're not running her in an Aero team, then obviously it's not, you're not getting a whole lot of benefits from it, from the substats anyway. But anyways, we'll run in here. We'll just kind of play this one out. I'm actually not too sure which rotation I want to go here, but we'll start like this. I do want to get that off, and I'm actually gonna opt to just pop out. So you can actually just opt to just do that and kind of feed off of her liberation as well. So you don't necessarily have to play her in a way where you're using her for liberation. I was trying to charge there. Also note too that when did I not get that charge off? Also note that when I'm using that echo right there with the gorilla, that the arrow that guy's inflicting is also being enhanced by all the arrow enhancements that we have as well. So understand that too. This isn't the best of representations here, but it's okay. We make it work. We can make it work. Didn't get a great cycle in here. You see how that, I don't know if y'all just saw that HP at the top, but you see that you're seeing what I'm kind of getting at here, right? So you can kind of use her in that regard. Like I said, this wasn't the best of examples, but nonetheless, y'all are seeing what I'm saying. If it goes to different bosses, it's much better. One of the downsides about her liberation, however, is that if you are using her liberation and letting her sing, if the mob goes to really far out of range, so if the mob is very mobile, so it's just like, say like you're fighting the fallacy or something like that, right? Say you're fighting Fallacy. Fallacy would be a very annoying boss to fight because this guy moves around everywhere, right? So say you're fighting Fallacy over here and you're trying to do the song. Well, Fallacy likes to move around. This guy is like the master of not staying still. So as a result, you're not going to be inflicting those dots on this guy. That's one of her biggest downsides about her liberation, is that while it does cover a large range, a lot of these bosses just move a lot. So as a result, you don't get the full benefit out of it. But in bosses that are not as mobile, it's not nearly an issue. Oh my, dude, I keep not charging that. As you see, like I'm saying, dude, like it just feels like, sometimes feels like that that mob, Cartethyia, is just stronger against Aero. I swear it feels like that. Like, I did a lot of testing and it really feels like that. But this guy right here, as you can see, like he moves around. This obviously we kind of still smash right through him, but he moves around pretty heavily. So in a situation where we're trying to fight him long time, or it's like a hologram, might not work out as well because he moves around as much as he does. So it's not necessarily the best option, or to really be like trying to use her song. Might be able to just play her better in the way that I was playing her, where I'm canceling her liberation. So that might work a bit better for you. Now, if you're wondering about her echoes as well, her echoes that you really want to be using for her are pretty much your standard set. You want to focus on your crits, your attacks, attack percentage, flat attack as well. You throw in some liberation as well. As I mentioned there before, her liberation is very strong, which I did not show y'all what that modifier was. As you see here, her modifier is crazy. So 1100.42%, which is why that liberation does so much freaking damage and is absolutely ridiculous. So you can play her in that regard where you're capitalizing off of her liberation. So you can throw some liberation on her stats, on her echoes. But you want to be using the Gust of Welcome for her, which is also the recommended set here. You want to be using that and be using whichever, depending on what your stats are, crit damage or a crit rate piece, 2 arrows and attacks as well. So you see my subsets here. Also, energy regen is obviously important, especially if you're trying to capitalize on getting some of that liberation damage thrown in there. Of course, you can implement some heavy attack damage bonus, but heavy attack while you're using it is not really, I feel, it's not like the most primary of things. But having some heavy attack in here definitely does not hurt to have. As you see, I do have it in here. So those are kind of be your idealistic things. So your crits, your energy regens, your liberation damage, and your attacks, if I didn't say that already, and your heavy attacks. Those are kind of your strong points there that you can use there. And you will want to be using this as her main echo here, which is going to give this arrow damage bonus. You don't get the extra here, which is for Rover, Aero, and for Cartethyia, obviously. Even though it says question mark right now, we know that's who that's for. But you do get this arrow damage bonus. Of course, there's always like the option of using something else, but there's not really other options for the Gust of Welcome. So you have to go to a different set if you were trying to do that. Now, her resonant skill is pretty straightforward, as I kind of mentioned it before. There's really nothing fancy about it. You're really just, it's like, okay, I do this fancy smancy dance attack thing where you move kind of crazily, and that's pretty much it. You put an Erosion stack on. That's her resonant skill. There's nothing fancy. It will produce an Ensemble Sylph if you're interrupted during a basic attack, heavy attack, mid-air attack, or solo concert with resonant skill. However, this variant doesn't deliver an arrow damage bonus, which is going to be listed. Let's see here, somewhere over here. Ensemble Sylphs generated by resonant skill will finish without entering solo concert. So it does not enter solo concert. And if it does not enter solo concert, then that means it's not giving this. This is solo concert with just a 24% arrow damage bonus. So understand that about her resonant skill. So if you're using it and you're producing it in Ensemble Sylph because you got interrupted, so you use your resonant skill, you got interrupted. It's like you're like doing basic attack and you're like bang bang, and then you use this and it produces that. That one's not going to be doing it. So as you see there's no circle around it. Whereas normally, let's produce one, a real one. You see it's going to have the circle around it, producing the boost. So that's the difference. It's very clear to see once you see it. So let's jump in the air. You can also use your resonant skill in the air, by the way. But as you see here, as we just showed you, by doing that, producing that, it's not going to produce an actual one. Okay, now we're just kind of fooling around. But y'all saw it right there. Let's go over here and give another representation there. So see this heavy attack, boom, that's going to pull things together. Also note as well that using her in this comp, remember she also has an ult that pulls things in. This ult also pulls things in. So you kind of use those two in tandem as well, which can kind of be neat. But as you see, there's a huge arrow damage bonuses, and you see this mob's kind of going out of range. You see it's not getting those stacks anymore because it's like right outside of the range. So while the range is very big on it, it can also kind of be annoying. But as you can see, rotating in between these characters and using her kind of as a DPS is a viable option, depending on what you're fighting. Like I said, I think Cartethyia is just, I don't know, she's apparently strong against arrow damage for some reason. Well, I mean, she's an arrow boss. She's an arrow character. So, I mean, you would think she would be, even though they say, you know, there's not really any arrow resistances on bosses and stuff. But you would think she would be, right? So, but we're over here and we'll kind of showcase again. So we're going through that basic attack. We're doing all four of those. So you see my Ensemble Sylph has that circle going on around it, which means we're producing that arrow damage bonus. We use this to watch how I'm negating attacks. So I see I took that damage, but you're not really hitting me because we have that shield on. And you see all that damage that we're taking there. Or that, or rather not taking, right? But a good comps to use here would be the ones like I'm using right now, but also instead the general GN will also be a great one to be using as well instead of the place of Jianxin. So that will also be a great option as well to be using. But once again, you can heavily emphasize on her Liberation here to really kind of garner some attack and some damage going on there. But ultimately, she can be played in multi different ways. Now, if you want to see how she plays with like a Spectro, like say Zani or something like that, we'll go over that. We'll go over the Spectro options. Let's choose a boss to go to. It's not gonna, I guess, not gonna die too quick. I guess in this case, we should probably go back to Fleur-de-Lis, huh? All right, we opted to go with Scar instead. So let's go over here and let's change this group. We'll put like we'll just put Zani in here. So I'll show you this with Zani just like this first. So Zani, Ciaccona, and a sustain here. And I'll let you see kind of how this works. And let me just tell you off the jump, this doesn't work that great. You really want another Spectro, someone else who can trigger Spectro Frazzles. But then of course, that takes away some of your healing, your sustain properties as well. But we'll kind of go over that. So I want you to see this here. Remember, if you don't remember the Zani guy, I'm not going to go over it fully, but Helical Embers is created for Spectral Frazzle stacks. Any Spectral Frazzle that is implemented onto the mob, when Zani is in the party, will become Helical Embers, regardless. So we're going to Spectral mode here. So we'll press A to make sure it goes into that. And I can switch out whenever I want to. So now it's producing, as you see it there on the top, we're getting the Helical Embers here. Now, they come a bit slower than they otherwise would if you were playing with Phoebe or something like that. However, the thing is that they are coming. So make no mistake on that. So this can be used. It's a viable option. However, I do believe that it's a bit better of an option if you have another Spectral Frazzle user that you can use there to really knock things on. Especially considering this is only going to go in Liberation, which I guess isn't that big of a deal when you're fighting a mob that, you know, it canceled it out, right? Because it changed into a different mode. So we'll go into this again. And make sure you press A here so it goes into Spectral Frazzle. And now we can go into this and see we'll continue to get Helical Embers, which will increase our burn bar, which will further increase the damage that Zani can inflict here. But keep in mind, characters like Phoebe will inflict 5 Spectral Frazzles every time she does an enhanced heavy attack. Also, keep in mind that a Spectral Rover is an option as well, because you're not heavily reliant on that Liberation. Now, Spectral Rover has the capability of dealing some sort of healing, however, it's very minimal, extremely minimal. This is if you have the Resonance Chains for Spectral Rover, which we'll show you here. So Spectral Rover over here can, you know, provide some sort of healing, but it's just not a very, it's not very reliable, you know, reliable option. But it can, you know, it's over, I think it's over this one. This one right here. Rover continues to restore HP for all team members. HP equal to 20% of Rover's attack will be stored every second for 5 seconds. Ooh, a big 5 seconds. So it doesn't make it the best of units in that regard. However, if you want it, like if you did not need a sustain, which generally speaking, if you're pairing everything properly with Zani, you really wouldn't, right? So if you're pairing everything and you're dodging everything, then you probably wouldn't really need one. But basically what you could do, an option to do here is just run just a straight DPS as well. So you could opt to use, you know, this or this and Phoebe if you really wanted to just really just stack on whoops my bad. Not you. You want Zani. If you want to just opt to just stack on Spectro Frazzle stats, which will then be converted into helical embers. So you can opt to this, and we're not gonna go over this again, but remember the break bar over here, or the burn bar, the blaze bar down here. This is what is going to increase on Zani whenever you're converting Spectro Frazzle to helical embers. So that's why you want that to convert over, because the higher this goes, the more reps you have in her liberation. So we can go back in here, and you can kind of see as well how the Spectro Frazzle will be much better with Phoebe here. But then you can also lay in, I feel like this boss is going to end up dying too quick, but you can also lay in Ciaccona's properties as well. So we'll go ahead and go into the blue mode, because as you can see here, see how many stacks that brings on just very quickly. So we can go into this, but we don't have a liberation, so we'll probably wait to do this until after this guy transforms, because he'll die too quick. But you see there, we have much more helical embers already, because obviously Phoebe, there's no one who puts on Spectral Frazzle stacks better than Phoebe does. So now we should be able to have an ult here. So now you can see we can kind of pair this around here. Let's go to Spectrum mode, then go ahead and pop out. Let's go back in here. We don't want to use her ult because I don't want it to die too quick. But you see now we can definitely very much so stack these on. And this will also benefit Phoebe as well, because she also benefits as well. But now you see we have lots of helical ember stacks. So this can be a very premier team, because like I said, you know, the more of those stacks that you have, the more damage that you're going to be pushing out. So you see how high those stacks are getting, which is making Zani crazy strong. So that is an option to be paired with both of these two, because you'll get some substantially higher stacks on helical embers by using both of them together. Now you could use Spectral Rover to have a little bit of pseudo healing in there. However, like I said, that healing really is straight booty cheeks, so it's not going to do you that much good, but it is an option, as the Spectral Rover will provide Spectral Frazzle stacks as well, specifically from his Liberation, which will provide a big chunk of Spectral Frazzle stacks, and also from his Resident Skill, which will also provide a lesser amount. But nonetheless, it will provide Spectral Frazzle stacks. So this would be a premier team to definitely be using if you want to run a Zani team, and you're really knocking these parries down very well, so you're pretty much never taking damage. So this would be an option, a very strong one at that. Now, in regards to Ciaccona's weapon, which I said that we go back to, right? In regards to her weapon, so really, like I said, this weapon really capitalizes on Aero, right? So you have, it increases her attack here, and it also inflicts Aero Erosion and increases Aero damage bonus and Aero res. But see, if I'm playing a team like this is a Spectro team. So what does that do for me? Not a whole lot, right? So that opens up the door to really just kind of, like I said, you don't necessarily have to have her weapon, but you can opt to use some other weapons. So like using the standard pistol is an option, which I actually do not have right now, but that is an option as well. So using the standard pistol is an option that you can opt to use. So this one gives attack and crit rate as well, and it increases energy regen, and then it also buffs the incoming Resonator with attack. So this is an option that you can easily use as well. It's a very viable option, and it's definitely an obtainable option. So I think that Ciaccona's weapon is one of the weapons that is not as important to get, because I think that she can very much be sustained across the board with with this one as well, and very useful. However, of course, if you're running an Aero team, then this weapon definitely does benefit very heavily. And if you want to play with Cartethyia, then this is definitely going to benefit you very heavily, and gratefully so. So if you can, then definitely do so. But that's pretty much the case with every character. If you can get their weapon, then get their weapon. But I do think that Ciaccona isn't as important as some other characters' weapons are. You know, it's not as reliant. And then of course there's some 4-star options that you can use here. Pretty much pertaining to like attack would definitely be a good option. This would probably be a good one. Or even some of the energy regen ones. Also, if you're trying to just get her ult, use her for her ult, then obviously energy regen could be an option as well. So those are kind of your options that you would want to use there for her different variants on her weapons. But ultimately, you know, if you can't get this one, then of course get it. But ultimately, Ciaccona is going to work best in Aero teams, as I mentioned previously. So you do have some options here to use in these Aero teams. Let's do a quick setup in these Aero teams. So you do have some options here. I would personally recommend, you know, like her, and then Verina or Shorekeeper, and then an Aero main DPS like the General, or her if you have it. Now, of course, do remember that Alto does provide a, wherever he's at, he does provide an Aero damage bonus upon an Alto skill. However, you know, it can be a little, I feel like you probably be better off if you want to use another Aero unit in there to just use the Aero Rover, quite frankly. But Alto does provide, so like I'm pretty much saying, like if you want to do like this, right? If you want to do just full Aero like this, you could, but it would make more sense to do like this with Aero Rover instead. With this Aero, with this this unit right here being like your main DPS, that would make more sense. But this is an option because Alto does have an Alto skill that gives you aero damage bonus here. So the incoming Resonator has aero damage amplified by 23%. So that is an option if you want to wiggle around with that. But however, he doesn't really provide much anything else. He doesn't buff anything else on the team. Nothing he does buffs anything else on the team. Nothing. None of his skills buff anything else, buff the aero damage for anyone else or anything of the sort. Nothing that he does anything of the sort. All of his skills are very, they benefit him only, with the exception of his Alto skill. And that does not change with his resonance chains. Does not change at all. So that doesn't make him the best viable options for that. So I would not recommend that. Unless you really want to play around with that, then you can. But otherwise, I would just recommend running an Aero team. That's where you're really going to get your bulk out of this, is running an Aero team with Ciaccona. So, like so. The sustain, and there we go. That's really where you're going to get your bulk out of there. And so I was running this team also in the holograms, and this team actually worked pretty nicely because of the shield as well. It really kind of allows you to play a very nice little style with this because of the shields that Jianxin can also provide. And on top of the damage, remember I told y'all the damage resistance that you get during that ult, right? Remember, when I'm popping that gorilla down, and he puts that stick down, he's doing these arrow waves. That's also, that arrow is also enhanced as well. So keep that in mind too. So you get an arrow enhancement across the freaking board, which is pretty substantial. And there we go. That's that liberation. Remember that outro skill? It's gonna get that liberation boost. Boom. See how that damage just went down? I can cancel out of that. Just go right into attacking. Just cancel out of that. Go right into attacking. Easy peasy, right? Yeah, crit damage piece right there. Hey yo, let's go. And you see those icons down below? That's where all the buffs that we're getting are coming from, as you see there. Which they just went away, but as you can see, all those buffs were down at the bottom. And so per se, we're going to go in here. We're going to show this hologram here, kind of give you all a representation of this team in specific. Just kind of let y'all see what's happening here. So with this guy, I mean, this guy will stay alive a bit longer, so we're not going to do the crazy one. Like we're just kind of going in here to show, right? So let's go here. Of course, this guy starts off with a bunch of things coming out the sky, so we'll do that there. And we can actually go right into this. We're just going to go ahead and use this. We're just going to pop out of it. Remember, I don't need to press anything because it defaults into Aero. And we're going to get through this guy. So you'll see how this kind of combination can work with these guys right here. You see the shields. Of course, your shields are very powerful, so definitely works. Now, I can probably get this back up in time to pop in another liberation. You have about 14 seconds, I believe it was. So we'll be able to capitalize on that liberation damage bonus still. even though it took us a bit longer there. You're getting that liberation damage. See that HP drop there. I can see I can stay in that, kind of slow it down. See how I did that? Slowed down the fight a little bit due to the fact that you have that damage resistance when you're in that. Oh, well, hold up. And we get the big gorilla here. He wants to help us out. And let's see if we get this charging going, get some shields going. Boom. Pop this ult here. So you see this team can work. Let's get this heavy attack. Oh, looks like we didn't break him. That was unfortunate. Alright, I think he does something crazy here. That's right, he starts throwing stuff at us here. After the tornado. You're doing a lot, my buddy. So remember, we can slow this down if we want, remember? See, he's about to attack right now. So let's do this. And then we'll see this. Boom. See? He's like, that damage ain't gonna do nothing to me. Damage don't do nothing to me. So as you can see, this team can work in that regard. And of course, you know, like I said, you can also use the general. General will probably be a great option, but the best option is obviously going to be Cartethyia. So that's going to be a great pairing with these two, but they can be used very nicely so. She plays it very quickly, so she's very nice in these quick-paced teams. So that's what you really need to note there. And you can use her as kind of a DPS, sub-DPS, and just kind of a straight-on support, as you know, in a Spectro team, adding the Spectro Frazzle stacks. So she has a multitude of different ways that can be played, and the only question is, what's your best way that you want to play her? So she has plenty of different options in that regard. And dude, why is the sky doing that? Are y'all seeing that? Where it's like going like dark and bright? What is going on there? Oh, is it just the area I'm in, I guess? And maybe because like oh, maybe it was a cloud. I'm not sure. I don't know. But either way, the question is, how do you want to play her? So that would be pretty much everything that you need to know there in regards to how she operates, the Aero Erosion that she gives on pretty much everything. Remember, Aero Erosion is going to be applied from her basic attacks, as well as, you see right there, but set 4, as well as her Resonant skill. You see right there, Aero Erosion, as well as her intro skill. So pretty much everything is going to apply her Aero Erosion on stuff. Her outro skill is going to increase the damage dealt of the Aero Erosion also, and keep that in mind. Also remember that her Liberation has a window where you can pretty much be invulnerable to damage pretty much. So use that to slow down the fight or to decide what your next move is going to be. You know, if a really strong move is about to hit you, boom, put that Liberation, then kind of slow it down. Okay, what should I do next? What should I do next? And that will allow you the opportunities to do so. All in all, Ciaccona is a very great unit, very versatile, and she will really shine with Cartethyia. So definitely be looking forward to that. We'll be having the guide for that as well, which will cover in everything, how that works, how that operates, all different teams that you can possibly use, which is what we usually do with our guides here, to make sure we cover all the grounds for everything. So that way free-to-play players and, you know, whales or whatever can all utilize this properly in different teams. You know, premium teams, free-to-play teams, you know, weapons, premium weapons, standard weapons, 4-star weapons, all the above. So be sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below if you have any questions or if you enjoyed this guide and you're looking forward to the next one. And like I said, I'm always glad to interact and answer questions within the comments. So feel free to leave one and say hello. And I will see y'all in the next one. Ciaccona is going to play a tune for y'all, but not right now because she has to go. But you can watch her sing into this microphone. Look at that fancy microphone. Ooh, it came straight out the 50s or something, bro. That's a old school classic microphone. Anyways, y'all have a good one. Much love. Holla.
Spikes content.